I have been sitting here with my ginger ale and there is this question I cannot shake about whether it is even ethical to have children in a world that keeps getting hotter.
That is quite a question to bring to the counter tonight, Claire, so tell me what stirred it up for you so strongly.
Every time I scroll through the news I see fires and floods and heat waves and then friends posting baby photos and my brain puts those two images next to each other and it feels like a glitch in the story of the world.
So on one side you see crisis and on the other side you see new life, and it feels like a contradiction that no one is quite naming out loud.
Exactly, and I catch myself thinking, if the future looks so rough, am I a bad person if I still want kids, or am I cold if I decide not to have any?
You are not the only one caught inside the tension, Claire, and the fact that you even asked the question tells me there is a lot of care hidden inside your worry.
It does not feel like care when my chest gets tight and I wake up at 3 in the morning replaying headlines in my head and wondering what kind of life a child would actually have in 50 years.
There is a word many people now use for the tightness in the chest about the planet and the future, and it is climate anxiety, or sometimes eco-anxiety.
I have heard that phrase tossed around, but I always thought it sounded like a social media buzzword and not like something serious.
It has become a popular phrase online, but underneath the trend there is a very real set of feelings that researchers are paying attention to, and they see it not as a disease but as a natural reaction to a real threat.
So feeling anxious about the climate does not mean something is wrong with me as a person.
If anything, it means your sense of reality is awake, because your mind is trying to make sense of danger that is slower than a car crash, but much bigger than one town.
I think what scares me most is that it is not just about me being uncomfortable, it is the idea of bringing a small human into a story that already feels stacked against them.
That thought touches the first big worry many people have, which is the fear that a future child will suffer more because of the climate than they would have in another era.
Right, and then I also hear people say that having children makes climate change worse because every new life means more carbon for many decades, and that thought feels like a heavy moral bill.
That brings us to the second worry, which is the fear of harm to others and to the wider planet through the extra emissions and extra demand that a new person may add.
And there is a third layer in my head too, which is the question of consent, like they do not get to vote on being born into a mess the rest of us created.
You have just named the three questions many philosophers and activists wrestle with, which are how much pain a child might face, how much impact they might cause, and how fair it is to invite them into a crisis.
Do we know how many people are really thinking like this, or am I just trapped in my own bubble?
Surveys in different countries show that a lot of young adults say climate change is one reason they are unsure about having children or want fewer children than they once imagined.
So it is not just me and a few dramatic friends having late-night conversations about this.
Not at all, and in some places a big portion of people your age say the climate has made them delay or rethink plans about starting a family.
Part of me hears that and feels less alone, and another part of me thinks, wait, if whole generations lose the desire to have kids, what happens to society?
That is the strange thing about this question, because it links the private world of bedrooms and kitchens to the very large world of economies and politics.
Before we get to all of that, can we slow down and sit with the emotional side a bit more, because sometimes it does not feel like a rational debate, it feels like grief.
Grief is a good word for it, because many people talk about mourning the future they thought they would have or the world they wanted their children to grow up in.
It feels like I grew up with this script that said work hard, fall in love, have kids, buy a house, and now the background of that script is on fire and no one updated the lines.
You were given a life plan that assumed a reasonably stable climate, and now you are watching the assumption melt, but the old expectations around family are still following you.
Exactly, and when older people tell me not to overthink it and to just follow my heart, I get angry because my heart is the part that is panicking.
Many in older generations did not have to make this decision with the same information you have, so they may not realize they're asking you to walk blindfolded where they once walked with daylight.
So when I ask, is it ethical to have kids in a warming world, what I am really asking is, how do I live with all this fear and still make any choice at all?
That is a beautiful way to phrase it, because under the ethical language there is a human longing for a way to live that does not freeze you in place.
But if we actually try to answer the question, starting with the case against having kids, what does that look like?
Let us imagine someone who says, I choose not to have children because of climate change, and let us explore their reasons with as much respect as possible.
One reason could be that they have already seen disaster up close, like living through smoke so thick they could not go outside for weeks, and they cannot bear the idea of their child breathing that air.
Yes, they might have watched rivers rise into streets or fields turn to dust, and they think, if I can spare a child from this story, maybe that is the kindest thing I can do.
There is also the version where someone feels that every flight, every fridge, every future commute of their child is another weight on a planet already straining.
That reasoning says,
If we are serious about lowering emissions, then fewer people in high-consumption lifestyles could be part of the solution.
The third piece is the justice one, where people in communities already hit hardest by climate change feel like they are being asked to sacrifice even more by not having families while big polluters keep going.
Exactly, and from the view telling an individual woman not to have children, while huge companies keep expanding, can feel cruel and even hypocritical.
I have also seen groups online where people declare that they will not have children as a form of protest until leaders act, and that feels both powerful and heartbreaking.
Those groups sometimes describe themselves as being on a kind of birth strike, where their private decision becomes a message to governments that they will not quietly accept a broken future.
So it is not always a quiet, lonely choice, it can be a loud political statement too.
Indeed, for some it is a way of saying, I refuse to pretend everything is normal while the house is burning.
But if we stop there, it sounds like the logical conclusion is nobody should have kids again, and that thought makes my stomach drop.
This is where the story opens back up, because there are also thoughtful reasons people give for having children even after looking honestly at the climate crisis.
Part of me wants to hear that side, because the idea of never having a family feels like cutting off a part of my identity.
Let us start with something simple, which is that the desire to care for a small person is not just a random whim, but a deep human impulse shaped by biology, culture, and stories.
So wanting a child does not make someone selfish by default, even if the timing is terrible.
Quite right, and for many people, family is where they find meaning, continuity, and the experience of giving rather than only taking.
Still, I hear the voice in my head saying that each child means more strain on the planet, and that voice feels very loud in climate conversations.
That voice usually focuses on the idea of a personal carbon footprint, but the biggest chunks of emissions come from systems like energy, transport, and industry rather than from one baby with a tiny spoon.
So blaming a baby for the sins of an entire power grid is maybe not a fair assignment of guilt.
Precisely, and it can distract from the responsibility of those who design and profit from the systems that drive most of the damage.
But what about the argument that rich countries with shrinking populations will struggle to support older people if fewer kids are born, and that this becomes a different kind of crisis?
That is the pronatalist worry, which fears that if birth rates drop too far, economies may slow and care systems may strain, and so some leaders push people to have more children for the sake of the nation.
That sounds like a lot of pressure to put on my body in the name of gross domestic product.
It is a heavy burden, and it can slip into seeing people mainly as future workers and taxpayers rather than as individuals with their own dreams and limits.
So on one side there is pressure not to have kids for the planet, and on the other side pressure to have kids for the country, and the person in the middle just wants to have a life that makes sense.
You are standing at a crossroads where every path has someone shouting at you, and it can make it hard to hear your own quiet voice under the noise.
Is there any way to frame having kids that does not sound like either doom or duty?
One hopeful frame is to see future children not only as consumers, but as potential helpers, healers, and problem solvers who might add compassion and creativity to the world.
That feels nicer, but it also sounds like a lot of pressure on a baby to fix the climate.
The point is not to expect any one child to become a hero, but to remember that human beings can also be part of the remedy through the communities they build and the choices they make.
So a child could grow up learning how to live with less waste or how to support climate justice, and that life might balance some of the harm they inevitably cause.
They might become a teacher who helps others understand the changes, or a nurse who cares for people during heat waves, or simply a neighbor who makes their small part of the world kinder.
I like that image more than the one where my kid is just a future car driver in a traffic jam of guilt.
Guilt is a very poor long-term fuel for life choices, and curiosity and care tend to carry people further.
This all makes sense, but I still feel frozen when I imagine having to choose between yes and no because both options feel like they come with ghosts.
Perhaps part of the problem is the way the question is framed, as if there were one universal ethical answer about children in a warming world.
So maybe the better question is not should people have kids, but how can any choice about kids be made with care and honesty in this context?
Exactly, and once you ask that, you start looking not for a single rule, but for conditions that make a choice more thoughtful and less accidental.
What kind of conditions do you mean?
For example, honest information about the climate rather than denial, room for partners to talk openly without pressure, access to contraception, and the freedom from being shamed no matter which path they choose.
That sounds so basic, and yet when I listen to conversations online, what I mostly hear is blame and fear.
Fear can be contagious, and our brains pay extra attention to messages that say you will ruin everything or you will be left behind.
So if I am stuck between fear of being a bad mother to a future child and fear of regretting not having one, how do I move forward?
One step is to separate the feelings into piles so that climate fear is not mixed with the fear of being unlovable or the fear of disappointing parents, and then you can see which fears are truly about the planet.
I think a lot of my panic is actually about being judged either as selfish for having kids or selfish for not having them.
Many people carry that double bind, and it can help to remember that strangers on the internet do not get a vote in your family planning.
That is hard to believe when strangers are very loud.
They are loud partly because the platforms reward extreme, uncertain voices, even on subjects where uncertainty is the only honest stance.
You are telling me that in this huge ethical debate it might be mature to say I do not know yet.
It can be one of the bravest answers because it keeps the door open for learning instead of rushing toward a decision just to silence the discomfort.
So there are people who decide not to have kids, and that can be a loving choice, and there are people who decide to have kids, and that can also be a loving choice.
Yes, and what matters deeply is how they live that choice, whether with care for themselves, others, and the planet rather than with numbness or denial.
Part of me wonders where climate justice comes into this though, because some communities are already losing homes to storms and they might not feel they really have a choice.
You are right, and that is why some scholars say we must see climate anxiety and reproductive anxiety as issues of justice, not just personal mental health.
Meaning that it is not fair to tell people in places that are already suffering that they should carry all the moral weight of deciding whether the human story continues.
Exactly, and it raises questions about who gets the privilege of choosing to delay or avoid children and who is denied the agency by poverty or conflict.
So if I sit here in a safe city with my ginger ale and agonize over kids, I should also look up and notice the bigger structures.
Not to drown in guilt, but to understand that your personal choice sits inside systems that need changing regardless of your family size.
It is almost funny because when we talk about climate, the question always becomes what should I buy or not buy, and now it has turned into who should I bring into the world.
That is the logic of individual responsibility stretched to its extreme, and while personal choices matter, they cannot substitute for collective action by governments and companies.
So are we over-moralizing the baby decision?
Sometimes yes, because deciding about children is already loaded with emotion, identity, and culture, and then climate is added like a heavy backpack on top.
What do you say to someone who has already had children and is now terrified that they have doomed them?
I would say that they did not create this crisis alone. and that the most powerful thing they can do is to love their children well and involve them in communities that are facing the problem together.
And to someone who wants children but feels paralyzed by the ethics,
I would invite them to explore whether they can build a life where their family finds ways to live more gently on the earth and to stay active in pushing for fairer policies.
And to someone who decides not to have kids and feels a weird mix of relief and grief,
I would tell them that both feelings are valid and that their care does not disappear just because it is not expressed through parenting.
When I imagine myself at 40 in both scenarios, I can picture joy and loss on both sides, and that is what makes the choice feel so impossible.
That recognition that no path is purely happy or purely sad is actually a sign of wisdom, and it means you are not treating children as magic solutions for emptiness nor treating child freedom as a ticket out of responsibility.
So there is no clean path, only a human path.
Exactly, and whichever path you walk, you will still be living in a warming world that needs your engagement and your kindness.
I keep thinking about the kid question as a kind of mirror that shows me what I really believe about the future.
Yes, because when someone says I could never bring a child into this world, or I want to bring a child into this world, they are also telling you how much hope or despair they carry.
Do you think hope is naive in this situation?
I think blind optimism is naive, but hope that sees the danger and still looks for ways to act as a form of courage.
Sometimes my climate anxiety makes me want to shut down all hope so that I cannot be disappointed.
That is understandable, but when we shut down hope, we often shut down our ability to care and to move, and then the crisis gains even more ground.
So the goal is not to erase the anxiety, but to let it point to what matters and then keep living anyway.
Yes, the anxiety can be like a smoke alarm that tells you a fire is possible, but you still need to decide what to say, whom to call, and how to step outside.
I like that image because it means my panic is not just drama, it is a signal.
And signals can be followed with thought rather than just with fear.
If a person feels that their climate worry is out of control, what could be one small thing they do after this?
They might talk to a friend or therapist about these feelings instead of keeping them secret, and they might look for a local group working on climate issues so that they do not feel alone.
I notice that when I imagine facing all this with a partner, I feel both comforted and terrified that we would just amplify each other's panic.
Good conversations between partners about this topic tend to include honesty about fears, clarity about values, and a promise to revisit the question over time instead of locking it in one night.
So the kid question is not a one-time exam, it is more like an ongoing dialogue.
Precisely, because your feelings and your circumstances may change, and a decision that feels impossible now might look different later.
I wish someone had told me that it is okay not to know when I was younger, because I felt like everyone already had a script.
Many people are still repeating old scripts, partly because it is uncomfortable to admit that the world has changed faster than our cultural stories.
If you were to write a new script for my generation, what would its main lines be?
Perhaps it would say, you're allowed to feel afraid, you're allowed to love this planet fiercely, you're allowed to want or not want children, and you're invited to weave that choice into a life of responsibility and joy.
That sounds kinder than most of the messages I see.
Kindness is not a soft extra here, it is a vital ingredient, because people who feel shamed rarely make better decisions, but people who feel seen often do.
I am curious, do you personally think it is ethical to have children now?
My answer is that it can be ethical to have children and it can be ethical not to, and the ethics depend on how honestly the decision is made and how the family chooses to live afterward.
That is not a simple headline, but it feels more true than any yes or no I have heard.
Complex truths rarely fit into simple headlines, but they fit quite well into long conversations over ginger ale.
There is something comforting about knowing that the question itself is part of being awake in this time and not a sign that I am broken.
I would say you are very much alive to be thinking about people who do not even exist yet and what kind of future they might inherit.
Maybe that is the real heart of it, that this question shows how much we care about those imagined faces.
Yes, and the caring can guide you whether you end up as a parent or as someone who nurtures the world in other ways.
I feel like tonight you did not hand me an answer, but you widened the path around the question, and that feels oddly peaceful.
If you can breathe a little easier while still looking clearly at the world, then we have done good work for one evening.
I think I can finish my ginger ale now without my stomach tying itself in knots about hypothetical future babies.
That sounds like a small but meaningful victory, and those are the ones that keep us human.
Thank you for listening to this whole tangle of thoughts and for not laughing at how dramatic it all sounded in my head.
I would never laugh at someone trying to carry both love and reality at the same time, because that is one of the hardest and most beautiful things a person can do.
I should probably let you close up soon, so I will save my 20 other questions about the future for another night.
The door will be open and the piano will be playing, so you and your questions and your ginger ale are always welcome.
Then I will say goodnight before I am tempted to start another philosophical crisis.
Sleep well, Claire, and remember that you do not have to solve the future before sunrise.
Good night, boss, and thanks again for helping me carry this big question without dropping it on my toes.
Good night, Claire, and good night to the quiet night that has been keeping us company this evening.
It is getting late and I should probably head home now. Oh no, I just reached for my bag and realized I left my wallet at home. This is such a mess because I really do not want to ask the boss for another favor tonight. Excuse me, you over there at the counter, I have a slightly embarrassing request to make. I forgot my wallet, so would you be willing to treat me to this ginger ale? I know you have been listening to our conversation this whole time, and I honestly hope it gave you something useful or at least kept you gentle company for a while. If it did help even a little, then I would be so grateful if you could support me with a small tip. You can do that through the QR code at the bottom right of the video or by using the link in the description. While you are there, it would mean a lot if you could also like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. In the description you will also find links to other pieces from totally different series that you might enjoy on other nights. Thank you so much for keeping me company and for the ginger ale, and I hope we meet here again soon.